Rumor alert. This is a rumor alert. Pedro Pascal has quit The Mandalorian in the middle of season 2. And if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you. Seriously, this is one of the stupidest stories I think I've ever heard come out of the rumor mill, and I've heard a lot of stupid stories. I'm going to tell you why this story is stupid and cite my reasoning as to why it's complete bunk. So first of all, the story comes to us from Bounding Into Comics, which does not have the greatest reputation in terms of being legitimate news. They're very much a clickbait site. They peddle in a great deal of rumor and innuendo in order to get views. So I don't take anything they publish very seriously. In fact, I take it with a great grain of salt, especially when they're kind enough to label stuff rumors, which they were smart enough to do on this one. Now, before we get into this article, I want to point out that this rumor comes from, surprise, surprise to no one, Grace Randolph, who runs the YouTube channel Behind the Trailer, or something stupid like that. Now, in all fairness, I like Grace Randolph in the sense that I enjoy listening to her review stuff. Like, I think that she's an interesting reviewer. Don't always agree with her takes, but at the same time, I like how she breaks down different movies and TV shows and stuff. When it comes to the news portion of entertainment, she's garbage. She's absolute trash. And the reason I say this is not to personally attack her. I'm sure she's a very nice lady. I say this because she has proven in the past that she makes stuff up. And what I mean by that is that she'll get like some inside info from an anonymous source. And then she'll take that inside info and spin off her own theories based off that info, but make it sound like those theories that are just from her own, imagination came from the source. So she basically kind of pads out what the inside scoop is and makes it sound like that was part of the scoop. And I actually called her out on this back when she was claiming that Kathleen Kennedy got chewed out by Bob Iger and that Kathleen Kennedy was going to be fired. She did this big video, and I called her out on this technique, and you know what she did? She blocked me on Twitter. She knew I was right. She knew my criticism was valid, and so rather than try to defend herself, she just blocked me. And that's fine. I don't care. Grace is allowed to, lie as much as she wants. But when she does and she only does this type of thing when she needs clicks, when she needs, that extra AdSense money, because this is the type of stuff that the fandom menace just jumps right on top of like a rabid dog. It's like a dog with a bone, and they won't let it go because they want to believe the worst about Lucasfilm. And, Lucasfilm was pretty bad to begin with, but there's a level of incompetence that needs to happen in order for this to be true. And I just don't think Lucasfilm was there. Now, that being said, Lucasfilm has done a lot of incompetent stuff in the past, but there are certain legal things that are kind of associated with TV production that prevent stuff like this from happening. And I'm going to go through that in a little bit. But I just want you to know that the source of this rumor is Grace Randolph, and she has zero credibility in my book. Never believe anything she says. Now, sometimes she'll defend herself. She'll be like, well, I was right about this, I was right about this, and I was right about that. But you know what? You can read the tea leaves. If you read The Hollywood Reporter, Variety, Deadline, and you kind of can make educated guesses about stuff that's going to happen, and when it happens and she's proven right, she's like, oh, I'm always right, I'm credible. But that's not the case. She's a broken clock that's right twice a day. Sometimes she gets them right. For the most part, her biggest scoops are always wrong. Always. Because she makes them up. Or she has someone who's giving her information that's just not credible. So with that in mind, I'm going to go through this Bounding Into Comics article, and I'm going to tell you why this is complete butkus. Okay? So, headline. Rumor. Pedro Pascal quit filming The Mandalorian Season 2 halfway through production. A new rumor claims that the Mandalorian actor Pedro Pascal quit filming the show halfway through the second season. The rumor comes from YouTuber Grace Randolph during her Mandalorian Season 2 trailer reaction video. Randolph first points to Entertainment Weekly's recent spotlight on The Mandalorian Season 2, where showrunner Jon Favreau notes Season 2 will introduce a larger story to the world. Favreau explains the new season is about introducing a larger story to the world. He adds the stories become less isolated, yet each episode has its own flavor, and hopefully we're bringing a lot more scope to the show. Executive producer and director Dave Filoni adds, everything gets bigger, the stakes get higher, but also the personal story between the child and the Mandalorian develops in a way I think people will enjoy. Favreau would then explain that they will be following different storylines outside of Pascal's The Mandalorian. He tells EW, as we introduce other characters, there are opportunities to follow different storylines. He continued, the world was really captivated by Game of Thrones and how that evolved as the characters followed different storylines. That's very appealing to me as an audience member. Now, they're using this to kind of cite that the focus is moving away from The Mandalorian. And Grace Randolph is saying that the reason they're shifting the focus away from The Mandalorian is because Pedro Pascal has quit. But that's not necessarily the case here. In fact, if you look at the first season of The Mandalorian, it's like each episode has very loose connections to the episodes that came before it. They were all pretty much bottle episodes, just strung together, and then like the last two episodes of the season had kind of like a loose connection to them, you know, or more direct connection. So it was kind of like one long episode split into two. What Favreau and Filoni seem to want to be doing is they want to make it a more expansive story so that, you know, it's not just this loose connection of bottle episodes for the new season. We're going to be branching out and seeing, you know, new aspects of the Mandalorian universe, you know, the post-Return of the Jedi kind of time period in Star Wars. And they cite Game of Thrones as an example of this. So the type of storytelling that we saw in Game of Thrones, where we had multiple different characters with multiple different storylines going on at the same time, but all kind of focused around like the Jon Snow, you know, kind of War in the North storyline. That's kind of what we're probably going to be seeing here, where we see the Mandalorian and the child as the central storyline. Then we have these different, you know, sub-stories that are going on, probably with like, you know, Cara Dune and Grief Karga and, you know, some of the other characters that were introduced in season 1. And that's what they mean by expansive. But Grace is reading this as, oh, Pedro Pascal has quit, so they're taking more of the focus off the Mandalorian. So the article goes on. Randolph notes that this is evidence to back up her information, which she claims comes from 2 different sources. Wow, 2 different bad sources is still 2 different bad sources, people. She goes on to note that this rumored row with Pascal began when the actor wanted to film a number of scenes with his helmet off. Randolph explains, while filming season 2, Pedro Pascal actually wanted to have some scenes with his helmet off. However, she notes, the Mandalorian creative team wouldn't budge on this. She continues, so Pedro Pascal, from what I've heard from 2 sources now, was frustrated about this, and also was pretty darn uncomfortable in the Mando suit on set. So he became difficult. And the final straw, though, even though he was difficult to be around on set, the final straw was that he went to Lucasfilm, from what I've heard from my sources, to try to get them to intervene on his behalf. And you combine that with Lucasfilm already trying to get involved with story aspects of Season 2, which I've also heard, including focusing more on standalone episodes rather than making them more connected, which I've heard the Mandalorian creative team wanted to do, which was kind of happening at the end of Season 1, Randolph stated. All right, there's a lot to go off of here, okay? So first of all, Grace Randolph is just a liar. As you can see here, even though she's quoting 2 sources, which she can't name, by the way, so who knows if they even exist, she's basically just spinning stuff out of her own imagination to try to fit this narrative that she's created, okay? Fit the facts into this fantasy that she's created. So first of all, when it comes to Pedro Pascal, you have to realize that in TV production, the contracts that are involved are such that they avoid this type of stuff. Pedro Pascal would not leave production in the middle of season 2 because of his contract, okay? He would have to breach his contract in order to do that. There'd be all types of penalties if he did, and he probably just wouldn't want to do it. Second of all, this is a very easy payday for Pedro Pascal. Now, if you remember in season 1, Pedro Pascal was actually doing a lot of theater. So it was his stand-in, his body double, who was actually in the Mandalorian suit for a great bulk of the shooting during the season, while Pedro was off doing theater, and he would just record his lines afterwards. So this is a cushy job for an actor. Pedro Pascal can go off and do movies. He can go off and do theater that he wants to do. So like the fact that he doesn't show his face is actually a benefit to him because it makes it an easy job. So if he really did want to show his face throughout more of the season, that probably wouldn't be something that he'd be upset about, because my guess is that when they initially went to him to offer the role, they probably told him, hey, this character is going to be wearing his helmet almost the entire time. We may show your face like once every season, but beyond that, we just want the character to look like this. And so he probably agreed to that going into it, which would make it highly unlikely that he would change his mind, deep into the second season. So the idea that he was also uncomfortable in the suit, like that could be true, but it doesn't look like the suit is very restrictive. I mean, it's basically just a jumpsuit with armor and stuff on it. The hardest thing would probably be the helmet, which might get kind of hot and make it hard to breathe in. But then again, like he only has to wear the helmet when they're filming the scenes. And all of his dialogue is going to be overdubbed anyway, so he doesn't even have to deliver a good performance when he's actually on set. And most of the time, it's going to be his stunt double anyway, doing all the acting and stuff like that. He doesn't even have to be on set for most of this stuff. So all this stuff just doesn't ring true to me. This sounds like someone who's just making stuff up because they don't actually understand how television production works. And the idea that he went to Lucasfilm and tried to have them intervene in the production, I don't even know what that means. It's like, who did they go to in Lucasfilm? Like, if an actor has a problem on set, they would go to the people running the set to express the problem. So he'd go to Dave Filoni, he'd go to Jon Favreau, he'd go to the episode's director or something along those lines. He wouldn't go to Lucasfilm. He wouldn't go over the production's head, because this isn't the type of thing that the production offices would typically deal with. So I don't see this as being like reliable at all. Moving on, Randolph then tells that Pascal was asked to leave halfway through the filming. Randolph then details that Pascal was asked to leave halfway through the filming. So when Pedro Pascal went to Lucasfilm, the Mando team was like, you know what, you should just go. And Pascal did. And that happened halfway through filming. Later she states, now, as I've said, I've heard the breakup was pretty bad with both sides upset. Do you have any idea what it means to dismiss your leading man from, a TV show? I mean, that's not the type of thing where you just say, you know what, you should just go. Just go. It's okay. We don't need you anymore. I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Okay? It doesn't happen. Now, let me tell you something. There's a difference here in the sense that if indeed this is true, we would have heard all about this. Okay, remember back when Kathleen Kennedy had to fire Lord Miller off of Solo? How big of a deal that was? A major Star Wars TV show, the flagship of Disney Plus, the flagship of Disney streaming services, firing their lead actor midway through filming season 2 would have been everywhere, okay? Pedro Pascal's people would have been contacting all the trades, telling their side of the story, trying to get ahead of the story. Lucasfilm probably would have been trying to do the same thing. We would have heard about this by now. If anything, okay, if indeed Pedro Pascal left halfway through filming, it was probably because his stuntman was going to take over filming because they didn't need his face anymore. They didn't need Pedro Pascal to actually be on set. He was probably going to go off and do other projects, because that's exactly what happened during season 1 filming. Okay, Pedro Pascal was doing a theater production through most of the filming of season 1. He just came in and did ADR. Now, he was on set for a couple of the episodes, but for the most part, it was his stuntman doing this, okay? And that's probably what's the same thing that happened with season 2, especially if they're expanding the story and they're focusing more on side characters and giving them more screen time. That means that he didn't have to be on set as much. It's absolutely ridiculous to think that, Lucasfilm and the Mandalorian production would just tell their lead actor to go take a hike, especially if they have a contract with the guy. And from what I understand about Pedro Pascal, he's not a difficult guy to work with. In fact, from what I hear, he's a delight to work with, and he's a professional. So I would highly doubt that he'd be in a situation like this where he'd be making unreasonable demands, where he'd be playing like a diva, where he'd be demanding more screen time for his face, because he knew going into this show that they weren't going to be showing his face a whole lot. But beyond that, the financial incentives to keep going on such an easy gig for an actor. I mean, this guy probably gets like a cut of the Mando license, merchandise licenses and stuff like that. This is a huge thing for him financially. I don't see him wanting to give up his piece of the Star Wars pie for something as stupid and silly as having more face time on screen. I mean, he's a legit movie star. He's in a ton of different TV shows and movies and stuff like that. What does he care? What does he care if he has more face time or not? It's an easy gig for him. He can just tell them to put in his stand-in while he goes off and does other projects. It makes no sense. And this is why I feel like Grace Randolph's theory is complete butkus. She's just making stuff up as she always does. Moving on, interestingly, in the same EW article that Randolph originally cites regarding Favreau teasing new storylines and characters, it also reveals that Pascal did in fact agree to take his helmet off to help Gina Carano film scenes. EW's James Hibbard writes, while former MMA fighter Carano, 38, who made her dramatic TV debut with this role, says she's more confident this time around, explaining she was helped by Pascal agreeing to remove Mando's helmet during their scenes whenever the camera was only on her. Carano added, I really wanted to see his eyes, which really helped. And this goes back to the fact that Pedro Pascal is not a diva. He's a professional. Now, keep in mind, he agreed to take off his helmet. What does that tell you? It probably tells you that he was keeping his helmet on for most of the filming. Why would he start, demanding more face time? And this is something to help out a fellow actor. This is something that professional actors do. This is something that good-hearted people do on set. They want to help, elevate their co-stars. So the fact that he was willing to take off his helmet when he was not on camera shows that he knows the rules of the game. Okay, he knows he's got to keep his helmet on when he's on screen, and when he's not on screen, he's going to take his helmet off so he can help out a fellow actor. So the article wraps up with, as Randolph notes, in the final episode of season 1, Pascal does take his helmet off after he suffers what appears to be a fatal injury during the shootout with Moff Gideon's forces. What do you make of this rumor? Do you think Pascal exited production of The Mandalorian season 2? All right, so I was really disappointed when they took off his helmet at the end of season 1 because I really wanted them to commit to the no, never showing his face thing. I can understand why they did it. They usually do this type of stuff. They did it, in Batman and The Dark Knight Rises with Tom Hardy's Bane. Like, they showed his face in like one shot. So it always helps to kind of remind people of like what Pedro looks like. And it might even be a gentleman's agreement that they show his face, once every season or something like that. I don't know what they have planned. But this idea that Pedro Pascal walked off production or got fired, complete and utter BS. Period. End of story. Never believe any of these rumors that you hear, especially from Grace Randolph or Bounding Into Comics. They're complete clickbait usually. Wait until you hear something from actual credible sources like Deadline, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, stuff like that. And always kind of take everything YouTubers say with a grain of salt, because if they're not willing to get sources who are on the record, chances are their sources are feeding them bupkis, okay? That's a technical term. It means lies, rumors, and innuendo. All right, sorry to rant on this thing for a while, but I really wanted to clear the air on this. I think it's important that someone who actually has some experience in TV and film production and, working and living in Hollywood kind of explain this stuff to people, because it's very easy. You want to jump on this. You want to hate on Kathleen Kennedy. You want to hate on Lucasfilm. You want to believe the worst of the worst when it comes to Star Wars, but that is not the case. Don't buy into these rumors. It is complete 100% BS. Mark my words. I'm willing to put up money that Grace Randolph is full of crap on this one. All right, guys, this is Matt from the Salty Nerd Podcast. Go check us out at saltynerdpodcast.com. Listen to the podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're going to be uploading a bunch of videos on a more regular basis. We'd really like your support on that. And we will catch you in the next video. See you later.